and good evening, and welcome to the Business and Banking Dialogue show. Today, Wednesday, the bi-weekly show, Wednesdays and Fridays. So today, Wednesday. Welcome to the show. Once again, we get you the best of new speakers and new topics in the world of finance and payments. I'm KK, your moderator for today's show. We're live on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Today, our topic of discussion is accelerating digital finance for MSME. The Indian MSME sector has been particularly hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. Millions of businesses across different sectors have seen widespread economic destruction. The biggest challenge for the MSME sector in this pandemic is perhaps survival, whether they can handle this lockdown and endure the shortage of orders. I think with over eight months in the crisis, we are still passing through the same phase because even after the unlocking, many SMEs are facing the challenge of not having enough orders or not having the money to continue to continue their business. Add to the payments are still stuck. Okay, the government's announcements have made it mandatory, especially for the government and PSUs to clear all the payment in 45 days. That's a great relief, but I think there is still a lot more to be done out there. So, I think we have discussed this aspect of the challenges of MSMEs. So, to discuss further the challenges and accelerating digital finance for MSME, please join me in welcoming Mr. Avinash Godkhindi. Avinash is MD and CEO of Zaggle Prepaid Ocean Services Private Limited, Mumbai. You will see his profile right in front of you in a few seconds. Here, there he is. Avinash is, like I said, is the MD of and CEO of Zaggle. Avinash is an international fintech and payments leader with over a decade and a half years of experience in 12 countries across 5 continents. Having worked in leadership roles in digital payments, fintech, and cash management business in product, sales, marketing, strategy, technology, and operation roles. Avinash, good evening to you and welcome to the show.
Thank you, KK. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, Avinash. And Avinash, before we get on to the discussion, what inspired you to create a fintech company for digitized expense management?
So, KK, just a brief background about our journey. I'm the MD and CEO of the company. The founder of the company is Mr. Raj. And Raj has been a serial entrepreneur. And about 9 years ago, he and I met and, we sort of hit off. And at that time, we were looking at a company which would be able to create a disruption. Because a lot of I'm talking of 9 years ago, so the world was a very different place then.
Absolutely.
Especially in India, a lot of things have changed. And so we were looking at ways and means. We could very clearly see the trend and we shared the passion of wanting to digitize, right? We wanted to move away from paper. We wanted to move away from the traditional ways of managing, whether it's expenses, whether it's rewards. And how can we create an ecosystem where businesses and companies can start making, very, very mundane activities completely automated, so that the focus of the business owner, the promoter, the senior leadership can be about creating value for their customers and taking care of their employees. So that was when we started our journey 9 years back, and it's been a very interesting journey where focus was initially around rewards, and from there we went to employee benefits. We saw traction there, so it moved on to employee reimbursements. And from there, we went to employee expenses. And from that employee expenses side, today we do full-fledged business expenses, including employee expenses. So a variety of expenses that any business would have. A significant part of it is employee expenses, but we cover the entire gamut. So that's been our journey.
And if I may ask, what's been the inspiration to call it Zaggle?
Oh, well, I think Zaggle essentially was an antidote to haggle, right?
Okay.
We were very, very familiar. Both Raj and I, we've spent some time in the States, studied there, worked there, came back, and the typical anthema there, or the feeling is that there's a lot of haggling that happens when you interact with people or businesses in India. Right? And it's partly true. It's there's nothing wrong about it, but we felt that if you can create an ecosystem where you take away the haggle, you have more transparency. Haggling comes essentially, KK, we believe, because there is lack of transparency, lack of data, right? So the buyer feels that he or she is being overcharged, whereas the seller feels that he or she deserves a much better margin. So that's the crux of where haggling comes from. But if you're able to create automation, digitization, transparency, the need to haggle goes away.
Yeah.
That's how Zaggle word was coined.
Okay, interesting, very interesting, Avinash. Thanks, Avinash. Once again, welcome to the. Good to have you. So you are essentially a SME, if not an MSME. And I'm sure, like all SMEs, you have gone through tough times in the last 8 months. So, what are the major challenges and concerns MSMEs face, especially in this, during these times, that are obstructing their growth objectives in the rapidly expanding digital world?
So, a great question, KK. Just to clarify, we tend to describe ourselves as a growth stage company, and for a variety of reasons, which I'm happy to share. Our business during this pandemic has really, really exploded. So it's worked very well for us from a business perspective, because a lot of and the way we look at it is a lot of the customers, both businesses and consumers, who were dithering about going digital, have finally taken the plunge because they realize that's the need of the hour. And once you have a situation where everybody is trying to look to control their expenses, right? Especially if you have employees working from home, you don't know how much expenses they are incurring, what expenses are going to pile up and come to you as a promoter or a CFO. And if you have a real-time track of those expenses, it makes it that much more easier. But if I were to look at overall from a ecosystem perspective, we work a lot with SMEs. The 2-3 key challenges. One is, as you rightly pointed, the suppressed demand, right? The demand has been suppressed even pre-COVID in India. But I think the pandemic has really brought to foray the acuteness of the dip in demand, right? So that is one of the biggest concerns. The second concern, of course, is access to capital, working capital. SMEs don't have access to working capital. Unfortunately, this particular pandemic has come at a stage where we also have had a crisis to some extent in the banking sector, right? We are going through a transition phase in the Indian banking sector, where a lot of the NPAs are coming to the foray, and a lot of work has been done to clean that up. But the aggression with which a bank would lend, obviously, possibly is lower today compared to what it would have been a few years ago, simply because the cycle that the banking industry is going through. I think the third and the most fundamental challenge, KK, which I think is not something which you can address immediately or on a short-term basis, but it's a more deeper problem, is the lack of digitization. See, if you look at it, a lot of the businesses in the startup ecosystem, etc., have always been much quicker to embrace digitization versus the traditional SMEs or the MSMEs in India. I think that change is coming through now, post-pandemic. The realization is that if you have to compete with the larger players, the companies which are, say, the Chinese companies, the international competition, you have to be able to compete on a level playing field, right? So if you can't go into a war with you wielding a sword and the other person having a gun. So you have to digitize, and that realization is coming much, much more acutely because of the pandemic, for a variety of reasons, which I think all of us understand: working from home, lack of support staff coming into office, so you had to do everything yourselves. And that is where the need to have information on a digital platform has become extremely, extremely important. So those are the three, I would say, key challenges which MSMEs are facing in India today. One is lack of capital, the other is lack of digitization, and third, obviously, the demand, suppressed demand.
Okay. So just deviating a bit, you said there's been a exceptional demand for your products, and this is good to hear. So like, could you tell us a couple of the top products that because of the work from home environment that has benefited you?
So, Kiki, if you look at it, one is, as I said, the uptake on our expense management platform, right? Every business that we had been engaging with, both enterprise customer as well as SME that we had been trying to crack into, so to say, a very large number of them pre-pandemic were more in the mode that, okay, we'll come back to you, this sounds interesting, this sounds good. It was more like a nice to have. It was like a vitamin, right? Post-pandemic, suddenly that became a painkiller. It became a necessity because you started to realize, having an eagle eye on your costs became extremely important. Very quickly, I think in the first month itself, most businesses realized that demand is going to stay suppressed for a reasonable length of time. People didn't know whether it's 2 quarters, 3 quarters, but people knew that it's more than a couple of weeks or a couple of months. So managing your expenses, everybody understood by and large that that's going to be the name of the game for the foreseeable 12, 18, 24 months window, right? So how do you manage your expenses, especially when historically expenses were managed where you had a finance team, you had a accounts team, all of them would come into office, they would present reports, printed reports to senior management. Where is the office, where is the staff? Everything is digital, and trying to get data out of, say, a system like Tally, it's not real time. B, it is not talking the language of business, it's talking the language of accounting, right? So for a non-accountant, it was extremely difficult to be able to figure out, where am I actually incurring expenses, how can I reduce those expenses. And today we have these dashboards, we have these graphs, we have these charts which allow business leaders and across functions, not just the CFO's office, the sales team, the marketing team, the CEO, to very easily understand where they're incurring expenses and how they can curb those expenses. The other space where we saw KK huge demand was a large part of our business also is around rewards. And those rewards historically used to be a variety of gift cards. Post-pandemic, we saw massive uptake in e-cards. So a lot of our business earlier was probably 90% physical cards, 10% virtual cards. The ratio flipped. Today we are doing 90% plus in virtual, and 10% is physical. And when you do it in virtual, the scalability goes up, the amount of flexibility that you're able to offer to a corporate or to a customer goes up dramatically, right? So we've seen that happen as well. A lot of people who are hesitant to give a virtual product to their beneficiaries, to their employees, to the channel partners, have suddenly realized that post-pandemic, that's the easiest, that's low friction, that also is highly safe and hygienic. So you're hitting multiple problems at one go. So for example, Diwali, we saw a lot of companies historically who used to give physical goods as a Diwali gift. A lot of them have converted to digital and e-gifting.
Okay. That's fair enough. I think it's a fair summation of where in this digital world, and specifically in the pandemic, things have changed dramatically. So let's talk about the fintech industry and part of that. It is definitely providing a lot of products and services to the MSMEs, though there is still a long way to go. What makes the industry so confident in redesigning the payment solutions to cater to their needs and also remain profitable? Because as you know, MSMEs have a lot of constraints in payments, and you still have to remain profitable. So, where does the confidence come from?
I think, Kiki, it primarily stems from the size of the opportunity, right? The
Okay.
size of the MSME segment in India is so large, and it's actually a misnomer to classify it as a single segment. The MSME in itself has multiple segments, right? Uh, and each segment across industries, and if you start to segment it, industry specific, there are a lot of niche requirements that each segment has in terms of size, as well as in terms of industry. So the size of the opportunity, I think, is why it's so attractive. It's so attractive for fintechs. It's so attractive for larger companies like Facebook, companies like Geo. Across board, you are seeing globally, not just in India, say in Amazon. Everybody recognizes the potential of the MSME segment in India. The second thing I would like to highlight is that India is a great place for innovation. Right? Indian customers are likely to push a business very, very hard to make sure that the value is very clearly front and center presented to them, and very clearly, quantifiable. And that's when they pay you, and they force businesses to innovate, to be more frugal. And once you've created a software or a technology which works in India, because India's size is also huge, so you need to have a very robust solution. And if you're, serving across urban and rural segments, you need to be able to serve across, great access to internet, no access to internet, great access to electricity, very low access to electricity. So you need to solve the problem 360 degrees. Once you've done that, the ability of a fintech to be able to take that solution and take it global is phenomenally high, right? You have the ability to be able to take it across, a variety of markets, in whether it's in Middle East, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Far East, and even the developed markets like US and Europe, right? You have the ability to take these solutions, and you would find that those solutions are more or less, able to cater to the needs of that audience. Of course, you need to, factor in language, you need to factor in currency. But apart from those two, and local regulation, those three pieces, you have a very good base product to be able to take global. And the propensity to pay internationally, especially in developed markets, is much higher than in India. So a lot of companies are not just looking at the product or the platform solution that they're creating only for India. They're looking at it to be able to make in India and then, take it global.
Okay. So, still, I would say, you look very confident and about the fintech services to MSMEs. And as you know, the MSMEs are facing a lack of capital and almost finding it impossible to raise finance. Yet, from your tone, what makes a fintech, what makes you or the fintech players so convinced to bet on this space?
See, there are, I think, two, three very strong underlying reasons which are typically not articulated, and I want to sort of touch upon those, KK. One is the psyche of the traditional Indian MSME business person, right? Mm-hmm. He's, for the lack of a better word, the business and the individual or the promoter are almost synonymous. You rarely come across Indian MSMEs which are fly-by-the-night operators, or going bankrupt is possibly something which is quite relatively common in, say, in the States, but in India it's a taboo, right? You don't go bankrupt unless you absolutely have no recourse left whatsoever, right? So the business is a part of the family. The business is, there is a emotional attachment. There is a in some ways a spiritual religious attachment to your business, to consider it in a very different way compared to some of the Western markets, right? So that psyche makes sure that even if the business is going through a downturn today, there's a high likelihood that the business person, the businessman, once the markets pick up, will make sure that his or her business would do well. And unless there is absolutely no recourse, the business will not fold, right? It would be a solvent business. So there are pros and cons to it, but this is how we are. This is who we are. So that gives a lot of confidence that the MSME will not just fold up and walk away, unlike some of the other markets. The other thing I think also people are seeing is that there is a very clear message coming from the government, right? We can debate, can the government do more? Has the government done enough? That's besides the point. But the clear message from the government that is coming again and again and again is that MSME is the backbone of the Indian economy. And the government is going to make sure that they're going to do everything that is possible or within their powers to support this segment, right? So there's a very strong tailwind for the MSME sector that is coming in from the government's end. We could debate, can they do more? Can regulation be eased? Can more access to capital be given? That is absolutely true. But there are already steps that are being taken, and there is hope that in future the government will do more. The third thing I think is the large size, right? If you're catering to a large enough base within the MSME segment, you obviously hedge your bets, and even if you have diversified your risk, even if some MSMEs that you're catering to go down, for example, hopefully you have diversified enough that the rest of them are more than sufficient to be able to pad up or shield you from the hit that you would take if a few companies go down. So the size and the ability to be able to segment that data, to be able to target your solution to a particular segment, and to use data and analytics and business intelligence to figure out whom to go after and whom not to go after. Those are the kind of capabilities that a lot of fintechs have, which and we have, which we believe that is a big plus for us. So that's our USP, and that allows us to feel bullish about going after this segment.
Excellent, Avinash. I mean, in these days when MSMEs are literally staring down the tunnel, I mean, your confidence, your warm smile about how you feel about the MSME sector, and that you want to do more things for them is a great thing. And I think the MSMEs will take a lot of confidence out of this discussion that we're having with you today. So, ladies and gentlemen, I continue to have my discussion with Avinash. And while I do that, you could send in your questions in the Q&A box, and I will try to get as many questions as possible across to Avinash. And you may also ask a question directly to Avinash if you desire to do so by raise your hand, and the digital team will help you to ask the question. So look forward to your questions soon. So Avinash, while we wait for some of the participants' questions to come, most of the SMEs, as I said, are facing capital issues. Okay, I think we did talk about this. So one of the factors that we are looking at, do you feel that the Uberization, as it is called, Uberization of B2B payments, flows and credit disbursement for MSMEs, are they the need in today's times in empowering them financially and preparing them for the uncertain future?
Yeah, absolutely, KK. If you look at it, platforms bring access, they address information asymmetry, they help in discovery. So platforms create a huge amount of value not just for the entity that owns the platform, but all the participants. That's the beauty of a platform model. And if a platform is done right, it can create so much value for all the stakeholders within that platform that it's absolutely a win-win-win, right? So look at how, for example, restaurants have coped with the pandemic. While a lot of restaurants have shut down, a lot of other restaurants have become so much more smarter, nimbler, and use platforms like Zomato and Swiggy to be able to deliver their, their cuisines, their food, and even during the pandemic, people are ordering online.
Oh,
So
yes.
you see the power of the platform. The restaurant industry today would possibly have some reasons to thank these platforms, because their access to the customer would have been completely cut off but for these platforms, right? So similarly, when you create a platform solution which is giving access to MSMEs to various financial services, to insurance, to credit, to a whole host of offerings. Once you create easy access, and once you break the information asymmetry, the beauty is that the matchmaking happens very, very seamlessly. So the solution that is being offered by a particular supplier gets very nicely mapped to a particular customer or that particular target group, right? And because it's a self-select and it's done in a completely democratic, secular manner, you have very little cause for friction or angst, right? Because if I'm forced to take a particular solution without knowing what my other options are, it's highly likely that even if the solution that I've picked up or chosen is the best one for me, where as soon as I get to know that there were half a dozen other options in the market which I wasn't aware of, I'm going to feel aggrieved, right? But here on a platform, when you have given access to the MSME, that these are your options, this is the pricing, this is the pros and cons, this is the value that you're getting. It becomes a very, very clear case where you have made the choice, and as long as the platform is playing it fair and ensuring that the correct information is being supplied, I think it's a huge benefit to the customers.
Okay. So let's have a word on the neo banking. Most of the fintech companies have kind of encroached, or at least not encroached, got on to some of the traditional boundaries of the banks, and they are called the neo banks, and they do more or less what a bank also does. So how can neo banks help the sector in transforming to the next level of growth? I'm talking of the MSME sector.
Yeah. So KK, neobanks are here to stay.
Yes.
Neobanks are basically, when we started off getting exposed to banking, you had a situation where, I'm talking of the mid 90s, when I had my first bank account, right? My bank account was essentially restricted to the branch where I operated the bank account. I had to go update my passbook, and that is it. I mean, that was my source of information as to what was happening in my account, and I didn't know what else the bank offered for me. There was very, very little access. Over time, global banks came in, and Indian banks have caught up brilliantly, and possibly taken left the global banks behind as well. And now we are seeing a lot of PSUs like YONO and SBI, for example, really doing a phenomenal job in giving you a 360-degree view of what a particular individual bank is offering, right? The entire universe, the Brahmand of what the bank has to offer is available in that one app or one website. Essentially, what a neo-banking platform does is open it up to say, why restrict it to a particular bank? Can I give you access to information from n number of banks, n number of financial institutions, right? And depending on your choice, you could choose to get access or get feeds from whichever banks or whichever financial institutions that you want. Especially if you have, banking relationships with some number of these entities, you definitely want to get better view of what they have to offer, right? And by giving access to some of your information, they would then be able to possibly through the platform be able to make much more curated offerings, curated solutions for you, so that you can go ahead and take advantage of those offerings. Today, a neo-banking is a buzzword, is a phrase, but essentially it is also a platform solution which is giving you access to credit from n number of credit providers. It's access to giving you an integrated view of your current accounts, giving you an integrated view of all the banking services that you can get. But this information, it could, and once you've integrated it with maybe your SAP or your Tally system, it can start giving you very deep business insights. So and those insights, as I mentioned again, can be presented in a way through the use of good UX and UI that is understandable to a business person and not only to a accountant. One of the biggest gaps that we have, KK, is a lot of the business people have a lot of information. If you talk to MSMEs, they'll typically say that, I have a sense, I have a gut, I know how much receivable is there, how much money is to be. But once you start to go beyond a certain scale, that gut or that instinct or that information that's stored in my mind has a logical limitation, right? And you may be right a million times. The one time that you're wrong, you may end up paying a very heavy price. So, but businesses also don't necessarily always trust their accounts person, may not 100% trust in the sense, they may believe that the accountant is doing is the right things and he's saying the right things, but they don't necessarily believe that the accountant has the business acumen to generate insights out of the data. The acumen sits with the promoter, the data sits in Tally with the accountant. The marriage of the two is, very, very, it has to have a divine sort of timing that has to happen, right? And with pandemic and work from home and all those things, it's become even tougher. So if you can give easy access to that data to the promoter or the CFO, or, not just the CFO and the promoter, but other, senior leadership in the company, a lot of insights can, be derived from that data that you're offering through the platform, which can be very, very powerful to the businesses, right? So those are the kind of things which a lot of companies, including us, are working on. And we see that to be the future as we go along. I think the regulator also has done some very interesting things around AA, account aggregation, as well as some of the stuff that has been done in terms of creating the platform solutions for network itself, allowing that opportunity to open up for people to create their own RuPay or Master or Visa equivalent. So I think increasingly you're going to see this wave where it's going to become more and more customer centric and less about how can I keep the information locked in my banking environment, to saying if the customer consents and if there is enough security around, how can we selectively open up that data so that the end customer benefits?
Yeah, that's true. But these days the neobanks or the fintech companies are using a lot of advanced technologies. It could be AI, could be blockchain, could be robotics. Do you think that the MSMEs are ready to take such aggressive technologies?
So the beauty of a neobanking solution, KK, is exactly that, right? Your core backend data continues to sit with your banks. The way at least I look at neobanking, and in an Indian context especially, the regulator is very clear that as of today, at least, no neobank has been given a banking license. So the idea, as of how we read it, RBI's view or vision, and when we talk to RBI and a lot of other stakeholders in NPCI and other places, the view seems to be that you work with the banks, the traditional custodians of money, the trust holders, the trust keepers. They continue to hold the core banking information.
Yeah.
You work through APIs, you connect to these banks, you extract data and information, and you present it in a manner which is easily understandable to the business. I think the importance of data presentation and making sure that this data is real time, it's relevant, the insights are crystal clear, but without any accounting jargon or any caveats there, is, I think, very, very powerful, because that is something which is sorely lacking today for a business person. It's not that they cannot take decisions, it is that they hesitate to take decisions in an increasingly complex and volatile world, just basis gut. What worked 10 years ago, or maybe even 7-8 years ago, today is just not good enough, because the world has become, I think there's a term VUCA or something like that, right? Which is very, very famous. And it's basically that the world has become very volatile, complex, and giving that power of information at real time in a easily consumable way. I think that's the biggest differentiator that neobanks can bring.
Okay. So let's take a first question, which is coming from Hemant. Hemant asked the questions that one of the problems that MSME faces are the migrant workers who have gone, and perhaps they are reluctant to come back, at least in the near future, unless things turn out dramatically. So given that, how can fintech companies come forward and, can they kind of take on some of the work that the migrant workers were doing, such that the businesses can start?
It entirely depends. Thank you for your question, Hemant. It's a good question. It's a tough question also. It entirely depends on the work that the migrant laborer was doing, right? If the work is primarily, say, in the construction area, or any of these industries which are, required to have hands, right? The way to address that need, and it's controversial what I'm saying here, but the way to address it is either to look for labor which is not coming in from very distant parts. So take the case of Mumbai. You look at migrant labor which is not coming in from, say, far off states, but within your own state or within your own region. That could be a much more quicker solution for a SME. The other alternative, which is controversial, which I was about to say, is to look at robotics and IoT and things like that, which eventually are playing a very crucial role in digitizing and automating, rather than automating, but also digitizing the entire supply chain in India. And eventually those technologies are going to play a huge role in making manufacturing much more seamless, predictable, cost efficient in a market like India as well. With regards to specifically fintech, there are a few areas where if the nature of the work is more about data entry, etc., those are areas where fintechs can definitely help. If a lot of that, and we see that a lot, for example, in using our expense management platform, a lot of companies used to traditionally capture expenses through Excel sheets or paper-based forms. This data was then eventually fed into a system. Then from there was an approval process. The approval mails were attached, fed into another system, and eventually somebody would process a payment in Tally, right? And while all this data was captured through printouts and kept in paper form, today through a platform like ours, which is an expense management platform, you can completely digitize and automate this. But when it comes to the phrase migrant laborer, I'm not sure how fintechs can really step in and help directly there. indirectly, obviously, being able to ensure that the migrant laborer is able to get paid on time, to make sure that the migrant laborer is able to transfer this money to his or her family if they are in a different remote area. Those are areas where fintechs are working, have been working, and will continue to, sort of add value.
Okay. Thanks, Hemant. Good question. Vipin asked a question to you, Avinash. He says that how about Alibaba style e-marketplace, which can be trendy, affordable, and right from khadi products and others can be done, and maybe get credit ratings to help the entrepreneurs and avail loans. Some such thoughts which the fintech companies can come about with.
Oh yeah, I think already there are a couple of startups who are working in a very similar space, which are basically B2B marketplaces. I think who've raised, who are unicorns, who have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and who are doing pretty phenomenal stuff. So you can look up those. There's also a platform which the government of India has, which is called GEMS, which is again a very interesting platform, which is there to promote MSMEs. And I think they've just recently announced that on the platform now they're largely going to encourage the sale of Indian manufactured, Indian companies, services, and products, right? So there are a lot of these, and government, a lot of people may not realize, a very, very big buyer of products and services. It's probably the biggest, if not one of the biggest, if not the biggest buyer of products and services in the country, right? And can that sort of a platform be extended not just from central government to state governments? Can state governments also start, sharing their requirements on the same platform? Maybe PSUs. So there's that way of doing it. Of course, there's a definite opportunity to build something like Alibaba for on the private side as well. But you'd be surprised that actually that journey is already on its way. Yeah, it's there are a lot of players who are trying to do this.
Excellent. Okay, let's take the question from Pushpendra Khandelwal. Pushpendra is a regular listener to our show. He says, he observes that demand is suppressed in today's times. Banks are not comfortable for further assistance to giving assistance to MSME. Digitization is a problem for MSME sector. In such a situation, how do you foresee the future for the MSME sector in the next few years?
See, I think yes, it's a tough question because Pushpendra is asking me to do some, crystal ball gazing and predict the future, which is always hazardous. But I'm an eternal optimist, and I genuinely believe that this is like a seminal moment for MSMEs in India. It's a very tough time, but I think this once the MSMEs go through this harsh phase, they're going to come out much stronger. They're going to be much more resilient, much more future ready, much more capable of dealing with unanticipated shocks in the future. Because let's accept it, right? I mean, this is once in a century kind of an event. Also, MSMEs in India traditionally possibly have had it. Regulation has by and large tried to protect them. India has got liberalized only probably 29-30 years ago. So there's been a lot of safeguards that have been there for the MSMEs, and gradually those have been sort of eroding. So it's very, very important that the MSMEs step up to the plate and embrace this change. I'm pretty confident that given the psyche of the Indian business person, that they don't let the business die so easily. Right? We would rather take risks, take chances, fight it out. Sell the family jewels, but keep the business going. And because of that never say die attitude, I think, and the government support, which is very, very important, because you need that helping hand, that little bit of cushion at times. I believe that Indian MSMEs are going to come out much stronger, and coupled with the global need for an alternative for China, and an alternative for supply of goods and services to China, which has become very acute post pandemic. I think we're going to, in the medium to long term, see a lot of, if we do the right things and encourage manufacturing in India, we're going to see a lot of demand eventually shift to India. And I'm not saying that we'll overtake China in the manufacturing sector or something big like that, but we'll become a very viable and much, much more robust alternative to China for all countries and all businesses that have historically given business blindly to China.
Great, yeah. That's good to hear from you, Avinash, about like today or yesterday was the first anniversary of the COVID. They said it kind of came out of that place. So hopefully we should see some changes and a lot more factories and other things moving away from there to here. Let's see how that goes about. But talking of the credit gap, okay, the World Bank estimates the current credit gap for MSMEs is to be close to $380 billion. Okay. So what other than digitization of efforts, improved regulatory norms for data security and protection needs to be considered to fill the gap? How do we fill this gap, according to you?
So KK, I think one of the things which I very strongly believe, and we haven't touched upon that in this session yet, is the need for better underwriting models. Okay. Underwriting in India historically has been very, 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 I wouldn't use the word backward, but very, very, traditional and archaic in many ways. And the balance sheet led underwriting, balance sheets, are obviously reflective of what happened in the past, not necessarily what is going to happen in the future. The world is moving very fast. What 20 years ago, a balance sheet which was 6 months old was reasonably okay to assess what's the condition of a business. Today, 6 months is huge. I mean, the world would have changed in 6 months, even in a non-pandemic environment, right? So the need to have better underwriting models which are data-driven, which are transaction-driven, which are cash flow-driven, which are, very clearly, and that's where I think some of the stuff that has happened in India that's been done by the government is around GST, etc. In the long term, of course, we've had teething issues, but in the long term, I think it's very, very good, because the MSMEs will stand to benefit, because when an underwriter is able to, congruate your GST data and your balance sheet and your P&L and your, information that your bank is able to supply, saying that this is the amount of transactions that this person has had, this is the amount of money that's come into their accounts. When you're able to sort of triangulate all this information, the ability to lend goes up dramatically, or significantly at least, because the confidence that this business is doing well, or this business has the potential to do well, goes up that much. So I think one is having much more robust and data-driven, more complex underwriting models, rather than just based on our traditional balance sheet models. The other thing I feel, and I keep coming back to this, is giving better access. One of the things that has historically happened is that an MSME would tend to go 9 out of 10 times maybe to the bank that they have a current account with. If they want to borrow, where do the MSMEs typically go in India? They pick up the phone and talk to their relationship manager and say, I need a loan, right? What is the condition of the bank at that time? What is the mindset of the bank? What are the kind of terms that they're able to offer? What is their sectorial preference? What's their balance sheet looking like? These are not considerations that historically an MSME has kept in mind. They have just blindly picked up the phone and spoken to the same bank over the course of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and sometimes across generations, right? I think through platforms like neobanking, the access is going to be there to say, look, you don't need to go back to your existing current account bank only. You have other NBFCs, you have other lenders, you have other players in the market who can possibly lend to you much larger ticket sizes with much lesser amounts of collateral, and at much better more favorable terms, right? So the second thing I think is democratizing access through technology, and specifically through platforms like neobanking. I think these two, over the course of the next probably 2 to 3 years, you're going to see a very big change in the lending space for MSMEs, where access is going to increase dramatically, and the amounts that are going to get lent is also going to be much, much higher.
Sure. Okay. So thanks, Avinash. So we have had some questions from the participants. So we also have a question that can be asked directly to you. So we have a very experienced banker want to ask a question to you. This could be a googly, so but I'm sure you can negotiate it well. So let's invite Harish Prabhu. Harish Prabhu, you want to ask a question directly to Avinash?
Sure. Yeah, good evening, Avinash.
Good evening, sir.
My questions are
he's a great Harish is a great cricketer. Okay, any googly he can take care of it. He can tackle it.
I used to open the bowling for my college, by the way. Anyway.
Oh, great. I'm a cricket fan as well, so good to hear that.
Go ahead.
Sure. See, what are the additional building blocks apart from the current digital ecosystem which is there, like India Stack, GST, bank data, balance sheet analysis, P&L, which can assist in underwriting? And this is more of a specific, underwriting, which can assist in underwriting MSME credit more smartly and more proactively, right? Because if you see earlier or even now, a large part of the judgment, right, of assessing an MSME credit is human driven, which is the branch manager of a particular bank, right? Because he understands, or he takes the trouble of understanding the business, and then what you call understanding the balance sheet, P&L, and the credit gap, and hence so, and then it goes to credit and blah blah blah. But then in the digital future, what are the other additional blocks? I mean, we've known about all these blocks which will hopefully help us. That's one question. The second is that once you dispense the credit, my biggest challenge is that I've been monitoring a lot of these things with the banks. The credit monitoring mechanism just doesn't exist, okay, in the manner and form which it should. So how in a digital future will a credit monitoring, digitally led monitoring mechanism, make the MSME credit more robust, both in terms of dispensing as well as in terms of monitoring?
So I'll take the second one first, if that's okay, sir.
Yeah.
So, see, you're absolutely right about the biggest challenge being that once you've dispensed the loan, where is it getting used? How is it getting used? This is a question that every lender would like to have a view on. And today there is absolute opaqueness because the money goes into a current account or a savings account, and then it's a black hole. The money, typically people, once they get loan from a particular bank, the first thing that they do is they move the money away from that bank to another current account, right? So that the visibility to the lender goes away. So one of the things that we are working on and we truly believe in is, how do you make sure that this money that is dispersed is not given in the form of a current account credit, but can it be given through in the form of, say, a credit card, right? Where the access utilization, for example, could be restricted. So let's say I'm a retailer for FMCG company, say Hindustan Unilever, right? Can the money come into a card which is given to me, and this card utilization is restricted for payments only to my distributor, right? So HUL has enabled this access to credit for me, but the money is not going to be used by me to, say, buy Diwali sweets, right? But it can only be used to pay for my distributor. So once the money is getting dispersed onto platform which is other than your current account or savings account, a lot can be done in terms of restrictions, etc., post consent of course, the borrower. The other thing we strongly believe is that, if you're able to couple it with an expense management system, right, and make sure that the borrower is actually using an expense management system which is able to help possibly the lender track where these expenses are being incurred. If I have dispersed an amount of X, where is that money actually getting used? Whether it is for working capital, if it's within working capital, where exactly, right? So I think these are two things which can mitigate, the risk. Of course, you're right. And as the ecosystem has less cash, I think more and more we'll have more transparency that, of course, we may not be a cashless economy, but we definitely can move towards being a less cash economy. And I believe that using these two mechanisms, we will be able to get a far better control as to what's got dispersed. And for example, if you're doing it on a business credit card, so we are launching a business credit card in the next few months. It's called the Founders Card. And the aim is exactly this, that, you're able to lend a small ticket size, a mid-ticket size. That money gets used, it's married to the expense management platform, the expenses are tracked by the lender, and basis the way the money has got utilized and the repayment history, more money can be dispersed as well, right? So your risk is sort of gradually increasing and not increasing on the get-go. So that's my response to the second question. On the first question, basically, what is the other things that can be done? I think I believe that a lot of the lending that today happens in India doesn't happen basis, the transaction volumes and the type of transactions or the transactions that the MSME is doing. It's still dependent on balance sheet and not saying that, okay, how much cash is actually coming into this MSME's business. Again, driven partly because a lot of the business historically has happened on cash. And also because the banks are not structured to lend on cash flow, they're more structured to lend on the strength of the balance sheet. People are more happy to lend basis taking some collateral than saying, okay, if you have very strong, robust cash flows, and as a lender, I have visibility that on 7th of every month, say you are getting this payment. Because possibly you are, getting this payment from a large enterprise customer of yours, right? So once those views are made available to the lender, again through a new banking platform, could be some other means, then I think the lending could become much more robust. Of course, there are no easy answers. You're absolutely right that there will always be a component which is relationship driven. But how can we minimize the decision making which is person dependent? How can we maximize or increase the decisioning that happens through data and analytics? I think that's the secret sauce. If you're able to do that more and more, the scalability increases by that much.
Okay. Thanks, Harish. I hope you got your answer there. So from a googly, let's move on to a quick Yorker. From Krishna Tripathi. Krishna Tripathi is from media. He's from ETV Global. Mr. Tripathi, can you ask the question?
Avinash, I just wanted to take your views. What is your experience about the biggest challenges faced by SMEs during the lockdown while accessing credit? And can you also elaborate on non-traditional methods suggested by you? If they don't want to call their traditional relationship manager, how they should go about raising money from other channels?
So Krishna, I think one of the things obviously is being able to access capital. We touched upon this at the very beginning, so possibly you would not have been in the call. But I think it's a combination of factors where you have a very suppressed demand. Because of the suppressed demand, you don't have enough cash flow. Then working capital access is not there. And of course, there is because a lot of the MSMEs don't have equipped themselves with the latest digital tools. It becomes that much more difficult for them to get access to capital because historically their access to capital was, as I mentioned, primarily driven through their main bank And if the main bank is not able to service them, they would have a current account with 2-3 other banks, and they would reach out to them and try to see if they can borrow with them. But all of it was, branch manager or relationship manager, RM dependent, depending on how large the business is and how much access they have. And that whole model got disrupted because of the pandemic, right? Because the branch managers stopped going to office, and the RMs stopped going to office, and some of them, moved to their native places, which are maybe like 5,000 kilometers, 500 kilometers away. So that changed the dynamic completely. So one of the things, I don't have easy answers, unfortunately. One of the things which is going to happen is over time, MSMEs are going to start embracing more and more of platforms like neobanking. And by embracing those neobanking platforms, they are going to see that access to capital is going to increase. They're also going to start accepting a lot more payments through digital channels. We have seen that happen in the pandemic. The uptake of payments through QR codes, etc., has shot up dramatically. By doing that, basically they are able to justify or prove to a lender that, hey, look, this is the amount of genuine business that I'm doing because these are payments being made by customers, and this is not, because it's non-cash, there is a trail, right? So the lender can very clearly see that, and if required, verify, and basis that, then get more confidence that they can lend basis the cash flow that the business is generating, rather than just basis the balance sheet. Because today, as you are rightly saying, banks have become very, very cautious, and they are not lending basis balance sheet simply because my balance sheet might look extremely good as of March 31st, 2020, right? But the change has happened essentially post March 31st, 2020, or maybe March 15, 2020. So since the world has changed fundamentally between those two time frames, banks, even though your balance sheet may be very robust, are still insisting on heavy collateral. I think some of the things that the government did, where the government tried to act as the security provider, was good. I don't know if that really worked because of the way it got executed, and some of it obviously did, but some of it could have worked maybe better if the banks had executed it better. But largely, I think those are the kind of things that can be done for MSMEs in the medium to long term. Short term, frankly speaking, there's this is a painful phase, and there is no quick fix to this, to be very honest. At least that I know of. I'm not saying I know everything, but this is my view.
I have a follow-up question on your founder's credit card. By
Yes,
when it can be expected, and whether you have tied up with other lenders like who will provide the finance for this thing, and how startups can avail. How will you assign the credit value for the founder's credit card for a startup?
Sure. So we are looking at this launch to happen in this financial year. We possibly will do a beta launch in the next 60 days. We were hoping to launch it slightly earlier, but it's got delayed because of a variety of reasons, including the pandemic, to be very honest. We also wanted to time it correctly, and we are now seeing the cases start to drop in India, slowly, apart from maybe one or two major centers. A lot of cities and states, the impact of the pandemic has started to reduce, because the vaccines have got announced. There's more customer confidence that, probably this whole specter of this pandemic will probably go away in the next, 3, 4, 6 months, right? So we were trying to be very honest, look at how to time that. With regards to startups, of course, we have a variety of ways in which we are looking to underwrite. Some of it is driven by the amount of capital that they would have raised. We also are looking to lend in a very calibrated manner to a lot of businesses, and not try to give very large ticket sizes to segments that we may believe are unknown to us. I wouldn't use the word high risk, but unknown. and see how the usage goes. What are the usage patterns? What are the repayment patterns? Where is it getting used? And basis that, gradually increase the lending that we do on that. We are looking at a variety of partners to be able to lend on this, because we are acutely aware that different segments are best catered by different types of lenders, and trying to do one size fits all doesn't necessarily work. So our objective is not try to force fit a round peg in a square hole, so to say, but try to create a set of lenders who are interested genuinely in those segments, and we are trying to create that marriage, so to say.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Very interesting, Avinash. So we've reached the hour since we started. So we did talk about you talked about Founders Card, which is a very unique proposition. Any other you would like to talk about? Any other offering which you feel will help the SMEs in a big way?
So I think I'll come back to our expense management platform, KK. We've now introduced multiple features there, multiple functionality. We just launched multi-currency feature there, which allows essentially an MSME who may be accepting payments in any currency, right? Or may have employees who may, incur expenses in any currency, to be able to, sort of track that. So I strongly believe that, in this, and again, coming back to the Indian ethos, we are not a country where we are very, very trigger happy and hire and fire. My experience by and large in India is that the last thing that a promoter wants to do is to fire their employees, especially in a pandemic, right? So you want to be able to maximize the cash flow that you have. You want to be able to maximize it so that even if you, need to sort of squeeze the last drop out of the resources that you have, you should be able to do that before you end up having to, retrench your employees or take some other drastic steps like that, liquidate your assets or something like that. So one of the biggest tools is to be able to, know where are you spending and how much are you spending, and looking at, how can you control that. Just by looking at Excel sheets can be very, very strenuous. And the other thing what we have seen, KK, is that when you make something relatively easy for anybody to do, people like to do it again and again. Going through tally reports and reports from your accountant of where you're incurring expenses through Excel sheets is generally a very laborious process. Most business people do not really enjoy that exercise, and hence people tend to shy away from it because it's painful, it's difficult, it takes a lot of strain and concentration. Can you make that more digital? Can you make it more graphic? Can you give charts, trend lines? Why can't those GUI features and functionality be offered to an expense management platform also, right? Why is it only always for the sales guys that these beautiful charts and graphs and videos and enablers are there? Why not on the other side where it's about controlling cost? So that's the thought process that we've gone into with trying to look at how can we create that user experience. And we've had tremendous partnerships. We've had partnerships with Yatra. We have had partnerships with banks like ICICI. We've had a contract signed with DBS Bank. A lot of these entities are offering this to their SME customers. We have a couple of other banks in the line as well. And we also have entities like NPCI who have actually evaluated our platform and found it really, really good, and are recommending it to partner banks to bundle it with their corporate credit card solution. So that's something which is very, very gratifying, because it shows that we have a solution which has real value to the stakeholders.
Right, Avinash. Thank you very much, Avinash. We've come to the time is always a factor. There's so much still to talk on the digitization process for MSMEs. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude this session. As you know, there is no doubt that MSMEs have been an engine of growth and and for job creation in India. Over 90% of the 63 million enterprises in India are MSMEs, as we all know. But during this COVID-19 crisis, they have been hit hard. And one of the big problems they have is the cost have continued to stay high as some people put it at 70 to 80%. But with digitization, there is an opportunity for the MSMEs and SMEs to cut down their cost. And this is what has been the essence of discussion that we had with Avinash. And I hope the kind of solutions that Fintechs are offering, it'll help the SMEs and MSMEs to cut down their cost. We will like to have a discussion again with you, Avinash, in some other time, and we can, in the nearest future.
Sure.
With these words, I would like to thank, please, ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking Avinash. We spent a wonderful time, one full hour of very informative discussion on MSMEs and digitization. Avinash, thank you once again for coming over and discussing with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, KK, for having me. Pleasure. Stay safe. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Same here. Bye-bye.